Hello and welcome to this section. In this section, we will learn how to use the table container. This section mainly includes the following knowledge points. First, we will talk about what our table container is, then we will introduce the basic usage of the table container, and finally we will cooperate with the basic usage of the table container. Let's give an explanation of the practice in class. So first of all, we come to the first point, the definition of table container. The definition of table container is very simple. It means that when the application program is running, it can dynamically create a table structure with multiple rows and columns, and control the number of rows and columns and cell content of the dynamic table by binding the data source. Do you think it is a familiar feeling after reading such a definition, Sleep? Yes, it's very special to create a widget with our loop. For example, let's take a look at the basic usage of the table container. The basic usage is first we add a table container, then we select the data source of the table container as an object array, and then we complete a data binding. In this way, the three steps will feel like our loop creation. Is it more similar? But it is a little different. For a circular creation container, can it choose an array as its data source? For a table container, its data source must be an object array. Then we can see that its data binding is also different. That is, it has no current serial number and current data, and it has the current cell data and table row number, table list and a data of the current row, so its association parameters are also different. However, in terms of the main body, its usage is very similar to our circular container creation, so if you have fully understood our circular container creation, it will be very easy for you to learn our table container again. So similarly, if you don't quite understand our circular container creation at present, I suggest you watch the video of our circular container creation. After you have a basic understanding of our circular container creation, you can learn the use of our table container. Similarly, we take down its basic usage and then we can directly open our editor to complete it, a case to be completed in this course. First, we input the content table container we want to learn in this lesson in the application name, and then we click Create, so we complete the creation of a basic application, and then we add a page under our signature to form such a good habit, and then we make a series of UI in it. Let's take a look at the basic way we're going to use our table container. The first step is to add our table container. Where is our table container? With the page selected, we can take a look. In the middle of our layout widget, there is a grid style of table, which is a bit like our Excel table. This is our table container. We can click to add our table container add. Next, the second point is to select the data source as an object array. We select our table container. You can see that its data source automatically opens a binding for us and requires us to select an object array. Since we don't have our object array, we might as well add an object array for it first. Here we will review our general method of adding object arrays. First, with the page selected, we click our object array widget to add our object array. Let's double-click to change the name to our address book. Then, we set a series of values for it. First, our address book. First, we change the name to our name. Then, we add a field called our address book a phone, and then add a field called our age, and then add a field called our gender, age field. We'd better use numerical values, so change one of its types. Next, we click the plus sign to inject a series of data into it. For example, the first user is called Zhong San, his phone number is 13 billion, then his age is 18 years old, and then he is a boy. Similarly, we add another line of data. The second one is called our Lisi. We copy and paste the phone here, this one is called 0001, and then his year, the age is 20, and his gender is also our male. Then we add another one. Here is our Wang Wu. The phone is the same. We copy it. He is 0002, and then his gender is 21 years old. Then he is a female head. We add another one, which is called our Zhao. The phone is pasted into a 03, and then his age is 19 years old. Then he is also a girl. In this way, are we interested in our communication? A series of initial values are injected into the address book, and then we can continue to complete our production. How to select the data source as an object array, and the value of this object array has been attached. Therefore, we directly select our table container, bind its data source to the value of an object array such as our address book, and then we did a series of data binding. Please pay attention. Before we used our recycling to create containers, do we need to make a series of unit contents in it, that is, our recycling cards? So we also need to add a series of widget for our table containers, and he needs to cooperate with such a series of widget to have a better one effect. Here we are also the simplest one. For example, we add a text in the table container. We can slightly modify one of its styles. In fact, you can already feel it here. The content we want to bind here must be a data of the current cell. However, in order to facilitate your understanding, we add an event for such a text. When the text is clicked, we will take a look at its associated parameters through our debugging records. For example, here is the current grid data. Let's take a debugging record of the current grid data, and then copy and paste it. The second one is our table line number, so let's call it our table line number here. Similarly, let's paste it again. The next one is our list of tables, which is also changed here, called a table column name, and then we paste it again. The last one is our current row data, which is also called our current row data. In this way, when we click, we can see the contents of such a table respectively. Then we intercept the value of such an address book and set it here. Similarly, we will find our table container, and our loop it's the same to create a container. In an environment of our editor, you can't see any effect in it. It's also a data-driven effect. Therefore, only when we run such an application can we see an effect of the data in it. So here we click a preview. In fact, we can basically see an effect here. In order to facilitate our inspection, we still worry about our inspection, and then switch it to the console. Let's take a look at the effect of DHA. First of all, the most basic point is that I just add a blue font and style to our table container, and then bind it to the current table data. We can display the contents of such a table here. In addition, we can see that the contents of such a form are completely consistent with those of our side, such as name Zhang San, age 18, gender, male, telephone number. Is it true that the contents of such a form are completely consistent? Yes, then we enter our Zhang San. We can see that the current grid data is our Zhang San, because what am I ordering? It's the content of our first grid, so he naturally showed Zhang San. Then its table row number is our 0 number, and its corresponding column name is our name. Then, is the current table row an object of our object array, so he printed our object for him. So then we understand that our current grid data corresponds to the contents of a cell like ours, and its table row number corresponds to its row number in the object array. Then one of its table lists corresponds to its table list in the object array, and finally one of its current row data corresponds to the last one left after column splitting an array of objects. Therefore, if you have any subsequent operations, as long as you understand this, we can make the next step for such a series of contents, but sharp-eyed students have found that for our object number, it is our name, telephone number, age and gender. Why did it become a surname after printing name, age, gender and telephone number? Has there been a change in the order? Why has there been a change? Here, when I initialize, we print out our object array for everyone to see. Here we use event to print out our object array when such a page is displayed. We can preview it again, because we see that we open such an object array. For our object array, we can see whether the name, age, gender and telephone are displayed here. The effect is also name, age, gender and telephone number. Therefore, this shows that the order of the object array we filled in at the end is not necessarily the order after the browser parsed it at the end. What if I want the order of such a table to be exactly the same as the order I finally displayed? This requires us to use the next attribute of table widget, which is called a feature of custom column. What is the feature of custom column? We can take a look all over the world, that is, it can customize the header information and header order we need, and support us to write an array for binding. Here, I highly recommend that you define our self-defined columns whenever you want to use our tables. Therefore, here, we do not use the binding method, so we can directly click our Edit Data, define its column name. For example, the first column name is one of our names. In order to make a certain difference from our current preview, I will program it directly according to the order in which we input data. The second is our phone number, then our age, and then our gender. You can see that now I dare to define the order here. The first column is our name, the second column is our phone number, the third column is our age, and the last column is our name. Let's preview. We can see if such a sequence is defined now. The first column is our name, the second column is our phone number, the third column is our age, and the last column is our gender. In this way, we can unify our sequence through the method of our custom column. Here is another student association. He said that maybe I exist in the object array in the backend. One of his table names may be in English, and one of the actual fields I want to display at last may be in Chinese. For the same age here, we can change the name to Fengling, and the gender here is still called employee gender, so whether we have set a series of settings for the display of a column name, then we can preview it again. Then you can see if one of his names has changed from our name to an employee's name, then his phone number has changed into contact information, his age has changed into youth, and then the last gender has changed into an employee's gender. So through our customization, we can define the order of each header. If we use our table widget, I suggest that you go to customize the column, determine its position, define its column name, and then if there is a difference between its column name and the actual displayed column name, you can use the column name display such a property to determine the content in each column that you want to display. Of course, you can also dynamically edit the column width of each table here. For example, now I am completely evenly divided, but here you may not want it to be evenly divided. We can click and edit column width to edit it. For example, when we are in the first column, I want a width of 300 pixels for a column, and then I check the stretchable property of the column, and I will not limit it here. Then for the same second example, we can stretch a 250 pixel image, and then for the third column, we can stretch a 60 pixel image, and then for the same gender, we can also make it non-stretch, which is also a 60 pixel image. We can see his employee name and our contact information in preview according to our first and second columns. Can it become 300 pixels and 250 pixels? It is also possible to fill in the delivery here. The default unit is our pixel unit, but what do I mean by stretchable? You can see that now because I set stretchable, I can use a chain here to send one of its pixels width sets an extrusion. Similarly, if you set a maximum width and a minimum width for it, it can be stretched within this range. If it is smaller than the minimum width, it will not let you stretch, so this is a series of attributes commonly used in our table container. Then for the following series of property is relatively simple. Property here we will not do a demonstration for you. However, some students here will say that I already know that the table container is very easy to use, but if I want to edit the table data, what should I do? Did I just say that for our table container, it is actually a container widget? In other words, it can not only contain one widget in it, so if we need to edit, what widget will we use for editing? Is it possible to make an edit through one of our input boxes? So here I will show you, that is, if I want to edit the data in a certain table, what should we do with the pure front-end operation? So here we add another widget of our input box, and then we change the width and height of the input box to the width, so that it inherits all the width of our table widget, and then the height also integrates all the height of our table widget, and then I won't make any changes to the instructions here. When will I trigger such a form widget? You can think about whether I will trigger a content I will modify when I click such a text. So here we add the event, so what do we do when it is clicked? Let's show an input box like ours. In addition to showing the input box, do I have to hide the text by myself? So here we let the text hide by itself. After the input box is displayed, its initial value must be attached to it, right? So what do I do in the input box? What is the operation of assigning a value to it? It is equal to a series of data in our current table. In this way, what is the effect after we finish this time? We can see whether it displays one of our text and our input side. Is our input side displayed by default? As we have just said, for our table container, it is the same as our circular creation container. It copies all the widget in it to the corresponding number of copies. At the beginning, we didn't want to display our input box, so we can hide our input box first, and let's have a preview. In this way, does it only display one of our text, and then when we single enter our text, we can see whether it has become a content of an input box. If I hand in the input method, what do I want it to do? Do I want such an input box to dynamically update the value of our table data, and then hide the input box itself, and then let such a text continue to be displayed? So here, are we going to do such a series of actions for our input box? So here, we will select our input box again. What about him? When he tries to hand in, let's hide the mullion ourselves, and then show our text. What is the value of this assignment? Is there a content in our input box? We can directly select a content currently entered in our drop-down menu. In this way, we can also give the time when it is not handed in. Here we can preview it again. Then here, if this value is the same at the beginning, then when I click Next, I can call out our input box and change it to 04. When I try to hand in, he will change it dynamically to 04. Similarly, here, in addition to selecting the input box, I can also let him add a focusing effect. Therefore, this does not allow us to select the text. In addition to displaying our input box, we also let our input box perform to focus on the selected operation. Of course, focusing on danger and its display, we need to add a little delay to prevent a series of errors in its widget. In this way, let's take a look again. When I click, it can help us focus and select such a value, and then we calculate the value here, 135, and then we try to teach it again. In this way, we have a contact information, which is not good. Then we can modify a series of contents of the same shift through such a method, so that we can dynamically modify a content of such a table, and we know that such a table content, when we modify it, we will directly modify the values in its object array, and then this is what we commonly use in table widget a series of methods. At the end, I'll give you a simple review. First of all, if we add a table container, the table container itself is a data-driven container, so we need to add a data source for it. Its data source is very special. It is to select a value of an object group. Therefore, if you don't have an object array, it can't display any data. Then we can bind a series of displays in it, and its actual effect is to copy and paste the corresponding times. Therefore, if our table only needs to display a text, we can add a text here and bind its drop-down menu as the current table data to display it the content of. Of course, if we want to edit the content of the form, we need to edit an input box. We also need to put it under our form container and trigger it through a series of events: when to display our text, when to display our number box, and when to update the value of our dynamic address book. After this series of operations, we can complete a production of Excel table type application, and then this is our simple explanation of table widget. Table widget is still a very high-frequency widget when we use it for data processing, so we must master the basic content of this lesson. If you still want to improve, there are many advanced ways to use table widget in our demo center. You can learn it by yourself. That's all the content of this section. Thank you for watching.